Saving versus investing. It's something I've been thinking about a lot. Is one better than the other? Kreston, what do you think?
I'll start by saying this. Often, as a financial advisor, people come to you with these sorts of questions, and you feel really guilty because your answer is always, it depends. But I actually do have an answer for this one, and it would be that you should save first, at least to a certain point. The whole idea of savings is that you establish a safety net so that you can cover any unexpected costs or short-term needs that might arise. And that's really important because life is unpredictable, it's uncertain. So that would be the key part. But it can't be the whole strategy. So once people have a comfortable amount set aside for savings, investing then becomes the more sensible and possibly less risky option.
What do you mean by less risky? Is it risky to save too much, or?
It really comes down to opportunity cost. So, people often talk about saving as the safe option, investing as the risky option, but not investing becomes its own form of risk because your purchasing power is going to be eroded over time due to inflation. So if your strategy relies on savings, which inherently has the lowest form of return on your investment, then you're never really making any significant or material progress in changing your financial position. So that risk is something that perhaps isn't as obvious when you're considering these sorts of matters. The second part to that would be that you've got these two risks in tension with each other. So one would be you need to secure your short-term today's needs with the uncertainty of tomorrow and planning for your future. So it's not about eliminating risk, it's about choosing what risk is appropriate for the time frame.
So if investing is going to have a much better outcome for our financial futures, why wouldn't we just invest everything? Why save money in the bank at all? What do you think about that?
It's one option, but it wouldn't be one I recommend because life is unpredictable. As I've said, life is uncertain. You don't know what tomorrow brings. Cars break down, home maintenance comes up, jobs are never guaranteed. Your health isn't always, going to be in the position it is today. So you can't rely on optimism to see you through different parts of your life. You do need some level of security, and that's really what savings represents.
So it's really just kind of about timing. Would that be fair to say?
To some extent, yes. The important part is matching, strategy with time frame. So I think in practical terms, savings should represent, it's a personal decision around risk management more than anything. So how much risk of short-term uncertainty should I wish to cover? Now, there's reasonable frameworks that you could use. Some people say 6 months, 12 months. To some degree, it does depend on unique circumstances. So perhaps you have a specialized job, in which case that's not easily transferable if you were to lose employment or something was to happen in that respect. So you do need to be pragmatic about your own circumstances to determine what the right time frame is. But we generally suggest 6 to 18 months would be that right time frame to securing savings, and then investing should be for anything that's beyond that. Here at Arrow, we talk about a bucketing approach, liquidity, which is what I've just spoken about, that short-term costs, whether it's planned or unplanned. The second part to that would be lifestyle. So things that you're working toward, it might be an upgrade of your car, might be a holiday, might be when you're changing jobs or starting a family. That's lifestyle, perhaps medium term. The third component would be longevity. So these are your long-term aspirations for your future. Perhaps it's mainly relating to personal exertion and your ability to wind down work or divert into a new career or hobby. They're the sorts of things that you plan for longer term, in which case building your financial future gives you those sort of options to pursue. So timing is really important because the way that you deal with timing in all of those different categories will help make sure that you've got strategies to deal with those different situations.
Great, thank you. Do you think that smart kind of everyday people are more likely to oversave, underinvest, or vice versa? What do you think?
I think people deal with that sort of decision making in different ways, but on the whole, humans are emotional creatures. We don't necessarily simply respond to logic and reason. Logic and reason would say everything's going to be great, or perhaps there's some people who take a more pessimistic view and say, well, I've seen this before and therefore I won't act. And both of those can be real barriers to making positive decisions for the future. So, I think when you approach this sort of process, it's important to be realistic about some of the outcomes and to try and overcome bias and heuristics with a little bit of logic and reason, because your emotional barriers will always try and take a lead in this sort of decision making. One of the most common ones that we would see is loss aversion bias. So, for example, a new investor, before they even start that process, they're already thinking in their mind, I am scared or I'm hesitant to lose money or be exposed to loss. And so they don't want to approach investing for that very reason. But what does that translate to in terms of outcomes? It means that they're potentially sacrificing on their future financial position because they're unable to work through those barriers in today's environment. So it's a really important part to recognize, and this is our role as well in financial advice. It's not always logic and strategy. It's actually I'm seeking to understand who you are, how you make decisions, and then applying strategies that will ultimately put you in a better position, but it's because you can follow them and it's appropriate for you as a person. So it is a really important integral part of decision making.
If someone was on the topic of being emotional when things are fluctuating a bit in the market, what would you say to someone who was a bit hesitant and wanted to wait until things settle down a little bit?
In thinking about that, I've realized that certainty is the price that you pay for missing the point. So, as I said, life is unpredictable. There's never going to be a situation where, everything's done with a neat little bow and the time is saying, it's safe to proceed now. That doesn't happen. Markets are uncertain. Life's uncertain. You're never going to feel like there's certainty in your life. So if you approach the decision making with that barrier in mind, you'll never make the decision to move forward. So I think the better question is whether your plan is sensible enough to proceed with despite the uncertainty. That's the key message.
Okay, so if someone's struggling to invest, what would you say?
Good money management is really about behavior. So if you can introduce discipline, perhaps, or a structure that promotes that good behavior, then that's the most effective way to start saving or start investing or making other financial decisions that will help you move toward some of the goals that you have. So that would be a critical point. In my own experience, one of the things that I've had to do early on is to track my spending, understand what my position is to start with. Do I have options to invest? Do I have options to save? And then once I ascertain that, I built savings in as an expense line in my personal spreadsheet. So with that in mind, I've now got the discipline that whatever's left over already accounts for the good behavior of saving. So yeah, my encouragement would be find those ways that will promote good financial decision making, because as I said, emotion will impact the logic and reason in that respect.
I think it's really great to track expenses and work out what you can save. If, for example, if I'm trying to save but I also want to invest at the same time because I don't want to not be investing for my future. How would I balance that?
I think it comes down to defining those two buckets, understanding what you're saving for, what that level needs to be, and again, what your risk appetite is on getting to that place of being, okay, I've got my full safety net in savings now. Yes, understanding the opportunity cost of investing, but to some respects, securing your risk position is probably the more important one. So I would say prioritize savings, but if you've got the appetite to invest as well, do that, but perhaps do that at a smaller focus compared to the savings component, at least initially.
Thanks, Kres. That's given me a lot to think about, and I hope everyone else has found it really insightful today.